Hi, I'm Sir Wade, and today we are checking out the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 5090, but we're specifically going to be looking at 3D applications, professional software, the actual creative work using these cards. We're not going to be focused on any of the gaming stuff. There are other channels who are going to cover that in way more detail than I'm going to be able to. We are focused on Maya, Blender, Unreal Engine, VRAY. I've done a bunch of different tests and a bunch of different software, and I have found some interesting results so far. Some of the things I've found are kind of what we were expecting from these cards. Some actually seem to improve NVIDIA's claims correct, surprisingly, and a few things are just downright confusing. And I've run all these tests with the 5090, 4090, and 3090, so we have the flagship card from the past 3 generations to compare against. Now, I'm very excited to hear your thoughts about all this stuff in the comments. There are going to be people watching this video who know some of this stuff better than I do, whether it's information about the cards, certain pieces of software, settings that maybe I should have used, or things that I should change for maybe a follow-up to this video, because it's already clear that we're going to need to dive deeper into this than I had expected. But for now, let me walk you through what I've been able to find so far in the limited time that I've had this card. And if this all sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing. I make a lot of videos on these types of topics, and maybe you'll like the other stuff on my channel as well. All right, now let's jump in to the benchmarks. Now, starting with the easy ones, the Blender benchmark. Now, one thing I want to just quickly preface all of these results with, remember that the 3090, 4090, and 5090 are all extremely fast cards. The 3090 is in the top 8% of all Blender benchmarks, the 4090 is in the top 0%, and the 5090, unsurprisingly, is the fastest, also in the top 0%, with a score of about 13,483, meaning a 43% increase from the previous generation. Now, that's not the 2x that some people are hoping for, but we might just get there yet. But I mostly just wanted to remind everybody that, like, while we compare these numbers and oh, this one's so much faster than the 3090, for example, these are still 3 really fast cards. So sort of just contextualize that to whatever other GPUs are still out there that you might have in your computer. If you're already running the 3090 or the 4090, then, we get to be a little bit more critical, but just, these are all very fast. And I actually rendered a proper animation out of Blender, but it had one of the weirdest results of everything that I tested. So I want to come back to that one a little bit later. I want to talk first about Unreal Engine. Now, pretty much everything that I've exported in this entire video is going to be in 4K, just to keep it interesting. And what I did in Unreal was a simultaneous export of an EXR sequence and a PNG sequence, both within the same export. Now, this is the only time that these two cards have the exact same result. It was really bizarre that it happened, so I decided to try something else. The 5090 is supposed to be particularly better at ray tracing. And if you haven't seen my last video, I actually went into the tech behind these cards, like what the whole Blackwell architecture and the AI processing, like how that's actually supposed to impact our work as 3D creatives. If you want more information on like how that's actually supposed to benefit us and not just gaming, check out that video. I have it linked in the notes below. But that whole concept got me thinking, if I could push the ray tracing a little bit harder, I wonder if there would be a difference. And this is what I found. I ran the same export, but this time I added path tracing to the renderer. So it just ups the quality, goes a little bit harder on ray tracing. When I switched to path tracing, the 5090 pulled ahead by quite a bit. It's about 80% of a boost from the 4090. Now, I only ran about 10 frames because it was taking a whole lot longer than the other method. So keep that in mind. If this doesn't feel like a very big difference to you from 14 minutes to 25 minutes, that's because it was only 10 frames worth of calculation. If I were to run this again for a second video or just for my own information, if we extrapolate this and have a lot more frames, this difference is going to become way more pronounced. So this is definitely a test that I would want to run again with like a full sequence of frames, because at that point it should be a massive time-saving difference to be actually rendering on the 5090. So this seems like a particularly good win for the 5090 so far. By the way, part of the reason that the 3090 is so much slower here is because this scene doesn't fit on the VRAM of the 3090. It had to roll over 7 or 8 gigs onto system memory. So that slowed things down considerably. I have more stuff on VRAM later on, but I just want to touch on that it's not just a card performance issue there. The VRAM did a big piece of this as well. This is the project we're using for the Unreal testing. It is really dense, full of Quixel Megascan assets. All of these are at nanite quality, so this is a pretty big file. And it's set up in a very production-focused way. Sequences broken down to shots with different department levels and all this kind of stuff. If you're interested in learning Unreal Engine, by the way, I'm just about to run another workshop to teach Unreal Engine. specifically in 5.5, all the animation features. So if that's interesting, there's a link in the notes below. You can still jump into my workshop. Jumping over to Maya, I did an Arnold render. Now I just did one single frame with this scene from my lighting video, back when I showed how to do different 3D lighting setups. And for a single frame, so no motion blur, with various AOVs all listed on this page, these are the times that I got. So once again, a pretty significant difference. If we went more than one frame, this is obviously going to stack a lot. So both Arnold and Unreal have had some pretty favorable results for the 5090. And I also had a request, somebody asked me to do vray. Now I've never used vray, but I ran the benchmark and here's what we got. I don't really know what a vpath is, but here's all the data. For those of you who use 3ds Max and vray, and hopefully this is helpful. Now one more that people had requested was DaVinci Resolve, specifically for an EXR image sequence. So I took the Unreal Engine image sequence that came out of there. I did the color management stuff, so took it from linear to Rec 709 with an ACES transform to make it hopefully feel like the real thing we might be doing. And I just looped it for 20 minutes. Hopefully this is helpful. I don't think this is actually the best way to test Resolve with the new card. And I think there's another version that's actually like optimized for the 5090. So probably don't take this slide as like the best DaVinci Resolve example out there, but for the person who asked, I wanted to include it regardless. Now let's jump back over to Blender. I already showed you the open data specifically, right? The benchmark says the 5090 should be quite a bit faster than the 4090, and that's kind of what I would have expected. What happened was really weird. I did a render of this animation. It's this side flip animation. It's actually part of my Skillshare class. This wasn't meant to be a plug for that, but I did do a whole animation like course on Skillshare. There's like 8 different classes. So if you're interested, I have the link below to that. But this side flip has the glass breaking, all this other kind of stuff. So there's some refraction going on. It's just rendered out of cycles. Nothing too crazy, I thought. But when I went ahead and rendered it, it's only 58 frames of animation, motion blur's turned on, still 4K, PNGs, all that kind of stuff. I don't know why, but the 5090 did worse than both the 4090 and the 3090. So I'm really not sure what happened here. This entirely could have been my fault. I might have done something like wrong somehow. Maybe there's something I didn't update. Maybe I need to like check the simplify checkbox. I'm actually not sure. This is sort of the biggest red flag to me in terms of just my own testing, because it's the most inconsistent with everything else that I've done. It doesn't follow the pattern. It makes me think that I have done something incorrectly, but I did double check my work and this is what happened. But because of how little time I've had the card, I have not had enough time to do another test with another file, another project. Like, I want to double check on this. So, you know, get a second opinion before, you know, if you're a Blender user and this is like, whoa, 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 hey, whoa, the 5090, I thought it was supposed to be faster. Me too. But I don't necessarily blame the card yet, because everything else I've done indicates that the card should have been faster. So I'm more dubious of myself here. I'm not sure who to blame. I don't know if it's the card or if it's me. So I need to do more testing. We need to do maybe a follow-up video to dive deeper into this, where we also talk about like Houdini, Cinema 4D. I didn't have files for those ones yet, so there's some revisiting to be done. But I wanted to bring this up because this is weird. So hopefully a couple of other people have actually done some 3D renders with the 5090 that we can look at their results. Because I can't imagine that this is actually correct, especially with what we were seeing out of Unreal. So I don't know. Full transparency though, this is what I got for the one test that I did. I will be doing more tests very soon. But now I want to switch things up. I have one more like export test, and then I have something different to show you. I did some EmberGen and LiquiGen exports. By the way, that's what I have here on the left. Like, this is live right now. If I move this around, you can see the fire. It's a live volume simulation in EmberGen. I did this cloud scene, and I did it only on the 5090 and the 4090. I didn't have time to do it on the 3090. They were slightly different between the two, and if I look at LiquiGen, which is the liquid simulation, it was a slightly bigger difference, but again, pretty close. Now, this is not the greatest representation of what I'd be doing in these tools, because very rarely do I actually export like image files out of either of these pieces of software. Usually I export like cached Alembic data to send to another 3D application. But I thought it'd be useful to put in there. What I really cared about though was this. Now, switching from export stuff over to like real-time viewport experience, these are my frame rates in EmberGen, but these are not just like my frame rates. I was specifically using a really big complex explosion to get the cards to struggle a bit. Like I really went overboard here. And then I just started upscaling the just ×2, ×3, ×4 complexity just to make like the VRAM fill up super quick and to just make the cards chug. Now, let me just take a second here to explain. VRAM is the memory that's inside the cards. Some of you watching are gonna know this. Just to touch on this, we rarely get to see what happens when you don't have enough VRAM or when you start to approach the limits of your VRAM. Certain applications will use your VRAM better than others. Things like Maya don't use it all that much. Unreal will use it quite a bit, but EmberGen and LiquiGen are very heavily dependent on your VRAM. That's where they, all the information for your explosions, for your simulations, it's stored on the GPU in the GPU memory, your VRAM, and it's all calculated and simulated there. So this is not like your regular experience. This is like me trying to make these things suffer. Because I have EmberGen running here. You can see this whole time, this has been a live this is a live volume simulation this whole time. I'm getting a smooth 60 FPS constantly. This is me being very mean to these graphics cards. All three settings, regardless of how much I'm filling up VRAM and that kind of stuff, the 5090 was definitely slowing down, but it was still art directable the whole time. It's got a little harder at the end, but still works. The 4090, I could only upscale once. I couldn't do it a second time and still really have fidelity. And the 3090 was rough from the beginning. I wouldn't have upscaled at all because it just, under 6 FPS, like, it's not fun anymore. How this would actually look in practice though, instead of just me making a bunch of graphs and stuff for a video, is if you had an explosion and you noticed that that explosion was hitting the bounds of kind of this range it's allowed to be in, and it's starting to get clipped, here on the side, here on the top, it's just like cutting off a bit. You'd have to lower the voxel size or increase the voxel allowance. Basically, you just have to have more 3D resolution, and that's going to take more VRAM. So depending on your graphics card and how much VRAM you have available is going to dictate how much you can push these different simulations. So whether you're using EmberGen or Houdini or Maya, Bifrost, Blender, whatever, this kind of thing is going to make a whole lot of difference in terms of what you can do with these cards. And hopefully that's useful because it's easy to show you render times and frames per second that I'm experiencing, but VRAM is a little bit harder to sort of quantify of why it's useful, how it works. It's a resource that you want to have enough of, but it's also something that'll impact those other numbers, frame rates or render times, and so hopefully that's useful. And here's some footage of what it was like actually using Maya with the Arnold Viewport on the 5090. So this is the sort of live view enabled. It's solid with no optimizations and no customizing. Arnold is usually a little bit slower feeling than Cycles and eevee and obviously all the Unreal Engine, things like that. Arnold can be made to be very fast, but I didn't do really any of the work required to do that. I just took a bunch of kit bash cargo assets for this environment and a pro-rigged character. They're all posed from that lighting video I mentioned, and I just used the default Arnold render settings, basically. Now jumping over to Blender, even though we had some weird settings for our export, it did feel quite a bit better to be moving around the viewport in the 5090. So I actually have footage of the 3090, and you can see here the noise level if I have the denoising turned off. And then even if I have optics turned on, this is sort of the feeling of just moving around with the 3090. Switch up to the 4090, this is what we got. This is the noise level, and then this is with denoising turned on as well if I'm using optics. One thing that's very cool is I have all these little glass shards. I can actually find the refraction of my character in the glass, and I can see that in real time. Even if I'm moving around, I can just see that live in the viewport. These cards are so fast. And of course, obviously if I jump to the 5090 now, it's gonna feel even a little bit better. There's even more effective denoising going on using optics, or if I'm not using the denoiser at all, it's actually it's a pretty clean image if I'm just moving around and it's just sampling everything. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should buy this card or whether or not this is a worthy upgrade from the 4090 if you're sitting in the 40 series already. I don't know. That's a you decision, and it might not be a decision that you're ready to make today. This is just day one of us being able to publish our reviews of these cards, and I've only had this thing less than a week. I still want to do a whole bunch of other testing, and there's more things I want to try. I have a lot of unanswered questions because there's some things that seem really amazing about this card, and there's other things that like the Blender test where I can't tell if the card just totally failed me or if I just really messed up in doing an export. So be sure to research and watch other people's reviews as well, and let me know in the comments if there's other things you want me to test. I would love to do some stuff in Houdini to see what the simulations are going to be like with memory transfers and that kind of thing. There's so much more to dive into, to discover, and not to mention all the other kind of Blackwell architecture based AI features in these cards. It's more than just DLSS and FrameGen for gaming. There's a lot of that stuff that will tie specifically to content creation workflows. I talked about a lot of that in my last video. Mega geometry, neural shaders, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I have absolutely just not used yet. And maybe that's the thing that makes that difference and we see that 2x in performance. I don't know, it's still early and I have a lot more to learn. If you have any suggestions, requests, or ideas, more insights on what we've shared so far, please drop them in the comments down below. I would love to read them. It's very helpful to me. If I got anything wrong, please correct me and share some insights down there so we can all kind of learn from each other. If you like this video, consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to see more of my stuff. And also if you want to learn from me in any capacity, I have an Unreal Engine animation course coming soon. A link to that down below. We're just about to start that class, as well as a whole Maya workshop if you are an animator and you want to dive deeper into Maya, or if just animation in general is something you want to look into. I have a variety of courses that I do, some good beginner fundamentals classes to get you started in animation. I also have a Skillshare course, as I mentioned earlier, which my link down there should give you a free month, which allows you to take that whole series of classes for free, because you could take that whole series within the free month or free 30 days that link would give you. We are all about making animation and this information more accessible to everybody on this channel. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Sir Wade, and I'll see you in the next video.